Usually when we think about the concept of becoming an immortal, the cultural expectation leans heavily toward something either purely fantastical or like entirely technological.
Oh, absolutely. It's always sci-fi or fantasy.
Right. We imagine a hero in a fantasy novel drinking some glowing centuries-old magic potion, or, we picture tech billionaires spending endless fortunes trying to upload their consciousness to a climate-controlled server farm in the desert.
Yeah, the path to immortality is almost always framed as this vague, mystical thing or a biological hack.
Exactly. But have you ever wondered what the exact step-by-step criteria might be if immortality wasn't a biological hack, but rather a mathematically precise spiritual and psychological framework?
It's a really fascinating premise, honestly, because human beings naturally crave categorization. I mean, we want a clear roadmap for everything, even the metaphysical stuff.
We really do like our lists and rules.
We do. But when you step into esoteric spiritual frameworks that attempt to provide that roadmap, well, the demands placed on the human psyche are usually staggering. They basically require dismantling the very structures that make us feel secure.
And that dismantling is actually the specific mission of today's deep dive.
It is indeed.
We are unpacking a highly detailed, deeply intriguing text from 2010. It's written by an author named Zhu Feng, and it carries this incredible title, Signs of Perfection in the Antimatter Structure of Life.
That is quite the title.
Right. So our goal today is to explore the 8 rigorous behavioral and mental standards this text claims are absolutely required to perfect your so-called antimatter structure. And doing that supposedly gets you entry into a realm it calls the thousand-year world.
But before we delve into the actual mechanics of those 8 standards, I think it's vital to establish some clear ground rules for our discussion today.
Yeah, definitely a good idea.
Because this source material operates within a very specific spiritual, religious, and cosmological framework. So to be explicitly clear to you listening, we are not endorsing this cosmology.
Not at all.
Right. Nor are we taking any side on the religious belief systems presented within it. Rather, we're just impartially exploring this text as a captivating piece of philosophical and psychological source material.
We're basically looking at it through an analytical lens, right? To see what its really intense demands reveal about human nature.
Exactly. Our attachments, the theoretical limits of psychological freedom, all of that.
So to even understand those demands, we actually have to decode that title first. The text talks about perfecting the antimatter structure of life.
Which is a heavy concept, no pun intended.
Yeah, it took me a minute to wrap my head around that. But the source frames this as an underlying spiritual physics. Like if you think about physical matter, it has weight, it is subject to gravity.
It clumps together, it accumulates, it creates friction.
Exactly. And our daily human lives operate like matter. We accumulate possessions. We build up these heavy egos. We are weighed down by social anxieties. So the text posits that immortality requires cultivating an antimatter structure.
Which implies a state of total, weightless release.
Yeah, total release.
And that physics metaphor is just the perfect lens for this entire exploration, because according to the text, absolute perfection is unattainable for humans. There is only relative perfection.
Okay, so we're aiming for relative perfection here.
Right. And achieving the 8 standards we're about to discuss grants what the author calls level 1 true attainment.
Level 1 true attainment. Got it.
Think of it as your foundational ticket to becoming an immortal in the thousand-year world. And the process of reaching level 1 isn't about, accumulating new spiritual skills. It's really an exercise in becoming weightless.
Like dropping baggage.
Yes. It starts by demanding a radical subtraction of our heaviest psychological burdens. And it begins with the complete and total elimination of shame.
Wow, okay. The primal reset.
The primal reset, exactly.
Because the text leans on the story of Adam and Eve to illustrate this point, right? It argues that their exile from the Garden of Eden wasn't merely about disobedience. The exile occurred specifically because they developed a sense of shame.
Right. They realized they were naked, they covered themselves, and in doing so, they created a barrier between their true selves and the natural world.
And to return to a divine state, the text argues you must wipe that shame out entirely. It also brings in Jesus' teaching about the necessity of becoming like children.
Because a young child acts naturally, without the burden of self-consciousness or embarrassment.
Yeah, the text equates this uninhibited instinct with Buddha nature, which is wild to think about.
Well, if we look at the psychological mechanics of human development, shame is arguably the very first and most powerful social construct we internalize. I mean, it's the primary tool society uses to domesticate us.
Domestication. That's a great word for it.
We use shame to teach children how to conform to the group, right?
Right.
How to sit quietly, how to follow unspoken rules. But the text views this domestication not as a necessary moral compass, but as the fundamental barrier preventing humanity from operating in a state of divine innocence.
Because shame requires an ego. It requires a person to constantly monitor how they're being perceived by others.
Exactly. And when you are monitoring yourself, you are carrying psychological weight.
I was really trying to conceptualize what it would actually feel like to live without that weight. And the best analogy I could come up with is like performing a total factory reset on a smartphone.
Oh, I like that. A factory reset.
Yeah, because when you buy a phone, it has this clean, efficient base operating system. But over the years, you download all these heavy battery-draining apps of societal programming.
Politeness, embarrassment, social anxiety.
Manners, the fear of public speaking, all of it. This text is saying you have to wipe the hard drive completely clean, back to the factory settings.
That's a huge ask.
It's massive. And honestly, I have to challenge the practicality of this. Like, is it actually possible for a functioning adult to shed shame entirely?
It's a valid question.
Right. If you strip away the fear of judgment, doesn't that just remove the brakes on our darkest impulses? You might just end up with total social chaos and people acting entirely on pure selfish instinct.
Well, that is the immediate logical fear when we discuss removing societal guardrails. But the text's underlying logic addresses this by drawing a really sharp distinction between an adult acting shamelessly and a being acting in true innocence.
Okay, what's the difference there?
So the chaos you're imagining stems from an ego that still exists, but has simply decided to stop caring about others.
Yeah.
Like a sociopath.
Right, right.
A sociopath still has an ego. They still want to manipulate the world for their own gain. The text, however, is advocating for a return to an uncorrupted pre-ego state.
So the ego is entirely gone.
Exactly. It implies that true natural instinct, that Buddha nature is inherently harmonious, not destructive or manipulative. If the ego is completely dissolved, the desire to exploit others vanishes with it.
So what remains isn't a selfish adult throwing off the rules. It's a purely innocent presence that naturally aligns with the environment.
Yes, precisely.
Well, a mind operating without that heavy operating system of the ego wouldn't just feel different internally. It would require an entirely different interface with the external world.
It absolutely would.
And that brings us to the second standard in the text, which demands absolute radical harmony with nature. And it gets remarkably specific here.
It really does.
The source dictates that you must treat every single plant as a personal friend. You have to view yourself as a companion to insects and birds. You can never, under any circumstances, harm any life whatsoever.
Total pacifism with the natural world.
Yeah, but then it adds a psychological requirement that I found incredibly striking. Entering the 1,000-year world requires an innocent, childlike heart that is actively capable of play and entertainment.
Now, that specific requirement fundamentally shifts this framework away from many traditional ascetic philosophies.
How so?
Well, when we picture ultimate spiritual mastery, the cultural trope is often like a monk sitting silently in a barren cave, completely detached, solemn, fasting, and unmoving.
Right, very serious.
Asceticism often frames the physical world as a distraction or a prison to be transcended through severe discipline.
And discipline is heavy. I mean, it takes effort. But say someone is incredibly disciplined, incredibly peaceful, and they don't harm a fly, yet they simply aren't the playful type.
Okay.
Maybe they genuinely prefer quiet, stoic meditation over games or entertainment. The text implies they still haven't achieved the required antimatter structure. They still can't get in.
They cannot. They are barred from entry.
Wow.
Because the text is painting a very specific, vibrant picture of the 1,000-year world. It describes a place of active, carefree joy, not a silent monastery.
So joy is mandatory.
Yes. The capacity for play is used here as the ultimate diagnostic test for your spiritual weightlessness. Think about the nature of play. Genuine play has no end goal. It has no agenda.
That makes sense. You're just doing it to do it.
Right. The ascetic monk in the cave is still trying to achieve enlightenment. He's treating his spiritual journey as a serious, weighty job. If you cannot play, it means you are still carrying an agenda.
You're still taking yourself or the universe too seriously.
Exactly. Playfulness is the empirical proof that you have truly let go of your adult burdens.
Okay, but maintaining that level of spontaneous, agendaless playfulness sounds wonderful in theory, but it directly collides with the reality of adult
Oh,
responsibilities.
totally.
I mean, how can you remain totally carefree when you have a mortgage to pay, a career to protect, and a family to manage?
Well, according to the text, you can't.
You just can't do it.
No. To sustain this state, the source mandates the severing of our deepest, most ingrained human attachments, specifically the concept of ownership and the ego's need for status.
Yeah, this is the juncture where the framework shifts from, an appealing philosophy of lightness into an intensely rigorous psychological trial.
A trial is a good way to put it. The text requires the practitioner to wander freely without any attachments. You must perceive everywhere as your home, and you must treat every single person as your family.
And actively refuse to distinguish between close relatives and distant strangers.
Yes, no distinction whatsoever.
It essentially turns human existence into the ultimate open-world video game. Like, when you play a game like that, you're just dropped into a beautiful environment. You don't have a permanent house you have to clean.
You don't have an inventory screen where you hoard items.
Exactly. There's no leaderboard where you check your status against other players. You just exist in the map. And the text means this literally. You must own nothing.
Nothing at all.
And that doesn't just apply to physical objects like cars or houses. You cannot possess the people you love. There can be zero jealousy, zero comparison, and a total ignorance of concepts like superiority or low status.
You must eradicate the desire to control, manage, or claim anyone else. The dissolution of societal hierarchy in this framework is absolute.
It's a complete leveling of everything.
You are required to unlearn the definitions of great and ordinary. You can no longer categorize people or situations as advantaged or disadvantaged. You're stripping away the labels that give matter its weight.
I see the logical consistency here, I really do. But delving into the gritty psychological reality of this, doesn't this demand conflict with the very essence of human connection?
It's definitely a point of friction for a lot of people.
Right, because if I am required to love a stranger I just met on the street in the exact same way I love my own child or my partner, doesn't that inevitably dilute the special, concentrated bond we share with our families?
That's the common fear, yes.
Because we associate love with dedication, and dedication usually involves a degree of exclusivity. Can human love actually exist without at least a tiny bit of possession?
It is arguably the most challenging concept in the text for the modern mind to accept. Because, our entire biological and societal structure is built on the protection of our immediate kin.
Right, it goes against biology.
But let's examine the mechanism of exclusive love through the lens of the text. The author views exclusive, concentrated love as an inherently flawed and heavy mechanism because it relies on the establishment of a border.
A border.
Yes. The moment your ego says, this person is mine and that person is not mine, you have drawn a line in the sand. Inside that line is attachment, protection, and preference.
And outside that line.
Outside that line is, at best, polite indifference and at worst, hostility.
Ah, I see. And wherever there is a border, there is something to defend. If I claim someone as mine, I am immediately terrified of losing them. I introduce the gravity of fear.
Precisely. By forcing the ego to abandon the categorization of mine and not mine, the practitioner is dismantling the very root of jealousy, resentment, and societal tribalism.
That's a radical shift in perspective.
It is. The text isn't suggesting that you dilute your love so it becomes a weak, apathetic feeling for everyone. It's demanding that you elevate your love so that it is overwhelmingly strong, but entirely unattached for everyone and everything.
So you appreciate the child in front of you entirely in the present moment without the heavy, anxious need to possess their future.
Yes.
Yes.
It is a complete dissolution of the ego's borders, resulting in a state of frictionless existence.
Okay, but think about this. If a person actually manages to accomplish this, if they wipe their hard drive of shame, treat insects as friends, live in a state of constant play, drop all physical ownership, erase their need for status, and dissolve the borders of their own family, they have essentially hollowed themselves out.
They've emptied the vessel, so to speak.
Right. They have removed all the normal, gravity-bound drives that motivate a human being to get out of bed in the morning. That creates a massive psychological void. So what fills that space?
According to the source material, that void is immediately filled with an intense, unshakable, and healthy positivity.
Positive.
Yes. The immortal described in this text operates as a literal force of nature, bringing to use the text's words spring and light to others,
Spring and light. I like that phrasing.
because they have no ego to protect and no possessions to lose. There is absolutely no trace of pessimism, hesitation, worry, or defensiveness within them. They move through the world doing as they please, completely free and unrestrained.
But they aren't just chaotic agents bouncing around, right? There are strict behavioral guardrails.
Oh, definitely. The freedom is bounded by fundamental reverence. They maintain an absolute reverence for God, for the sanctity of life, and for the balance of nature.
They never complain about their circumstances, they never gossip, and they never sow discord among others.
Never.
However, embedded within this section is a specific clause that is incredibly profound and honestly requires careful attention.
Yes, the resistance clause.
The text explicitly states that while these immortals are a source of endless harmony and light, they must never silently endure others, forcing their will upon them.
It's a striking boundary.
This was the most fascinating paradox in the entire source text for me. I mean, you are expected to be incredibly compliant to the rhythms of nature. You are mandated to be completely reverent to God.
Right.
You are required to be a radiant, joyful beam of spring light for every single person you encounter without a shred of ego. But at the same time, you absolutely, fundamentally will not be a doormat.
You fiercely and actively resist any form of human coercion.
Exactly. How do those two realities coexist in the same psychological profile? Like, how do you fight back without an ego?
Well, it forces us to redefine what true freedom means within this framework. True freedom here is not an act of rebellion against the universe. It is a state of perfect, frictionless alignment with the universe.
Alignment, not rebellion.
Yes. When you achieve this antimatter structure, when you are perfectly aligned with nature and the divine, you recognize with absolute clarity that human coercion is an artificial construct.
It's fake.
Someone trying to force their ego-driven will onto you is an aberration of natural harmony.
It's a violation of the physics we were talking about earlier. It's someone trying to impose gravity on something that is intrinsically weightless.
Exactly. You do not resist the coercion out of pride, anger, or a need to protect your status, because you've already eliminated all of those things.
So why do you resist?
You resist it simply because you are completely immune to human manipulation and the arbitrary, heavy rules of society. You have become a sovereign entity. To silently endure someone forcing their unnatural will upon you would be to accept a falsehood.
Man, that's deep.
The immortal is free and unrestrained. They flow through the world like water. Water brings life to everything it touches. It yields to the shape of the riverbed. But if you put it in a container and try to compress it, it will shatter the container.
Because water cannot be compressed or commanded by human hands.
Precisely.
Flowing like water, bringing life everywhere, but utterly uncompressible. That is a phenomenal conceptualization of what this antimatter structure looks like in practice.
It's a very powerful image.
Let's zoom out and look at the sheer scale of what we've covered today. If a person somehow manages to strip away all societal shame, lives in radical, harm-free harmony with the natural world, plays with the unburdened joy of a child, relinquishes all ownership and status, loves every human being equally without the need for possession, radiates boundless optimism, and absolutely refuses to let human coercion dictate their actions.
Then they finally achieve level 1 true attainment.
They gain their entry ticket and join the ranks of the immortals in the 1,000-year world.
And what is perhaps most staggering about Sheffing's cosmology is that it considers all of this rigorous, almost impossibly demanding psychological transformation to be merely the starting line.
Just the beginning.
According to the source, achieving these 8 standards is just the foundational baseline required to eventually cultivate toward level 2, which grants access to a higher realm called the 10,000-year world, and eventually level 3, the Elysium Island continents.
It certainly puts our daily anxieties into stark perspective. Just getting your foot in the door at level 1 requires abandoning almost every single metric that modern society tells us is important.
Almost everything, yeah.
So, for you listening right now, take a moment to reflect on the 8 standards we've unpacked today. Which of these feels the most completely alien to the way you live your life?
It's a tough question.
Is it the idea of wiping your hard drive and entirely dropping your sense of shame and social conditioning? Is it the terrifying prospect of giving up all ownership, the concept of my house, my achievements, my family?
Or maybe it's that radical mandate to be joyful but never silently endure another person imposing their will on you.
On the flip side, which of these demands actually feels the most appealing? Which one makes you think, if I could just drop that specific weight, what a profound relief it would be?
As you consider which weights you might want to drop, I want to leave you with one final thought experiment that stretches the implications of this text to their absolute limit.
Let's hear it.
We have been discussing this framework as an individual journey toward immortality. But consider what would happen to the human species if this wasn't just an individual pursuit, but a sudden global realization.
Oh, wow. Everyone all at once.
What if, tomorrow, all 8 billion people on Earth simultaneously achieve this perfect antimatter structure? We would have a planet with zero hierarchy, zero ownership, zero shame, and an absolute refusal to coerce one another.
It sounds like an absolute utopia.
It does, but without ego, without competition, and without the anxious drive to accumulate resources or outpace our neighbors, we wouldn't build skyscrapers. We wouldn't launch satellites.
The drive would be gone.
The very engine of human civilization, which is fueled by the friction of our desires and the gravity of our ambitions, would instantly grind to a halt.
That is a wild thought.
If humanity actually reached ultimate spiritual perfection, would it usher in an eternity of perfect peace, or would it effectively mean the immediate quiet end of human history as we know it?